Portland Thorns hosting Chicago Red Stars at Providence Park. The number 1 seeded team, top-ranked team in NWSL Shield winners, taking on the 4th seed Chicago Red Stars. There were some real David and Goliath sort of storylines headed into this one, right, Lisa? Let's sort of rattle some of them off for everyone who might have forgotten them based on the current result. But going into this match, for starters, right? Let's start. You and I both picked Portland. We were like, hey, there's just going to be more there. But I'll also say, in fairness to us, some developments happen in terms of the personnel who were available in this match. We did previously record our preview of these games prior to any type of injury updates, released from the league. And heading into this match on Chicago side, they got hit with some COVID protocol, and players were placed listed as out on the injury report due to that. So their MVP candidate in Mallory Pugh was unavailable for this match. One of their backup, very solid center back in defender Kayla Sharples was also unavailable, listed as out with the same COVID protocol. And also missing, Julie Ertz and Alyssa Nair, 2 players that they have been without really throughout the majority of this season. And their veteran defender, U.S. Women's National Team defender as well, Casey Kruger, listed as out with illness. And Portland Thorns sort of having some unknowns on their side as well. We did chat a little bit about and celebrate the fact that Crystal Dunn is welcoming a baby with her husband. So she was listed as out, but trainings are intense across the league. And Lindsey Horan suffered an eye injury during a training and was a game day decision. And come game day before kickoff, the starting lineup revealed that she was not going to be in the starting 11 for the Portland Thorns, despite being listed as questionable the night before. So even with some really big key players missing from this match, Lisa, on both sides, there was this sort of narrative that because of how Portland has been built this year, in a season in which they really, really showed off the depth of their squad, that there was still going to be enough there for them to excel on the pitch and get through it, because you still have a solid goalkeeper in Bella Bixby. You still have an MVP candidate in Angela Salem, right? Costa Rican international Rocky Rodriguez. They still had Canadian gold medalist, right? Christine Sinclair, and the very, very smart, dynamic attacking player in Sophia Smith, right? So they had all these pieces. And then you look at Chicago Red Stars and you're kind of wondering where that production is going to come. Like, is it going to fall to Kalia Watt, who ended up getting the start in this game? So all of these sort of kind of David versus Goliath scenarios as the 1 seed versus the 4 seed. Will Portland continue on this remarkable run that they're having already won 3 titles in 2021 this year? And lo and behold, Chicago Red Stars said, no, that's enough of that. They go on into Providence Park, a place that has not been kind to them, and defeat Portland Thorns 2-0 to advance into the semifinal. They do it on goals from Katie Johnson and Sarah Woldmoe, and they do it by frustrating this Portland Thorns side. It just sort of from the jump. Portland, both these teams, I thought it was a very good example, Lisa, of both teams just sort of going into their semifinal with their set game plan, right? But one just worked as opposed to the other one not working. Honestly, I hate to just simplify it like that, but it's true. We've seen this Portland Thorn team retain possession, right? Want to have the ball, want to create a lot of shots, want to create a lot of crosses, and then sort of maybe get some goals, and down the stretch of their final third of the season, they've had some very narrow score lines. And heading into this match, Mark Parsons talked a lot about how finishing was a thing that they were working on in training. And then going up against the Chicago Red Stars team, sticking to their game plan, making things very, very hard for a team like Portland Thorns to sort of break down their shape in order to sort of get that breakthrough goal. And it just sort of felt like maybe Portland, by retaining all that possession, was eventually going to get this breakthrough goal in the game, but it just never happened.
That's one of the craziest things about this game and this season. And heading into this, Portland was coming off of the bye week, but prior to that, in their last 6 matches, they had only won 1 game. So Mark Parsons focusing on the finishing. Hey, great job, coach. He's one of the greatest coaches, and that's what they needed to be working on. But I think that the pieces that were missing for Portland were bigger pieces than Chicago. Maybe not bigger pieces, but pieces that are harder to fill. Mallory Pugh is a huge loss for Chicago Red Stars up top, and that forces a lot of pressure on players like Kalia Watt, who didn't actually end up getting on the board tonight. It's other players that helped pick up. And I think that that's what we saw more from Chicago than we did Portland. It was the players around coming as a unified group and saying, okay, we don't have Mallory Pugh to lean on up top. So what can we do? We need to win the ball back defensively and then work it up through the midfield and we can't just find Mallory Pugh and have her dance her magic on top of the ball and create things up top. Where else can Chicago be creative? And they took that challenge and they accepted it and they won. They beat that challenge. Whereas a team like Portland Thorns, missing Crystal Dunn, yes, who has been out the last few games, limited minutes over the last few matches for the Thorns, but a player like Lindsey Horan is a big loss in the midfield. And even the fact that her injury and her questionable playing status wasn't determined until right before the game, I think that plays a toll on the player's mindset of this game, because Lindsey Horan is an instrumental part of the Thorns midfield. She is their creator. She is the one that can break up plays defensively, start the quick transition, find those nifty passes to Sophia Smith and Morgan Weaver and Simone Charlie up top and linking up with Sinclair to be that combination player. And the Thorns were lacking Horan's presence in the midfield. Because of that, Chicago was able to dominate more of the midfield, I think, throughout this match. Portland had their moments and they had their opportunities to get on the board, but also the fact that Chicago scored first and in the first half, 37th minute, the goal coming from Katie Johnson, that changed the game for Chicago, because at this point now, Chicago is up a goal. They can sit back. They can play more defensive minded. They can pack into a low mid block and make it really, really difficult for Portland to unload that block without a player like Lindsey Horan, who is known for her creativity to unlock those blocks that opponents throw at Portland. The game just fell into Chicago's lap and they took it and they capitalized on it and they really ran with it. And it was exciting to see. It was a bit of an upset. Just going to say it was, but I think Portland dropped the ball on a lot of what could have been good chances for them. They ended the game with 21 total shots. Portland did. Chicago had 5. But it doesn't matter because Chicago had 2 of them find the back of the net. So it's not necessarily about the quantity of shots, but the quality. And that was really evident in this Portland-Chicago match.
Yeah, I don't think that's unfair for you to bring up or mention at all. The game really did sort of feel like it was won and or lost, depending on who you're talking about here. In the middle third there, Chicago's midfielders just covering so much ground, really not giving a ton of space for Portland to work with when they did have the ball, having to sort of force them to make that quick decision, right? And it just sort of not panning out in terms of building up in attack. And I also don't think it's unfair to sort of, sort of say that maybe Chicago's game plan in itself didn't have a moment where they looked particularly unrattled, and I think that speaks very highly of the team this year, considering what was the assumption that Kalia Watt was going to be their main offensive piece in this game, and she goes out with a knee injury just before the half-hour mark in this game. And not only that, goes out after being the main player to get into the attacking third for Chicago and sort taking on a veteran defender like Becky Sauerbrunn 1v1, winning the balls, beating the defenders to the ball. So on the other end of that, going out after trying to make a defensive play on Megan Klingenberg and having to come off, and then having Katie Johnson slot in, and then just minutes later getting that goal and having it sort of float in past Bella Bixby. It just sort of felt like, in terms of, again, in game plans, that is where Chicago, that is like their sweet spot, right? That is where they wanted to be. They had a lead in the first half. They didn't concede anything in the leading into halftime, and then coming into the second half, still sticking to their game plan and sort of forcing Portland to get uncomfortable and perhaps having to adjust theirs. And we saw that a little bit from Mark Parsons, and trying to making some substitutions, right? Bringing on Simone Charlie again in the same mindset of having a different attacking look, a different attacking option, and bringing off Morgan Weaver. And the Red Stars sort of operating and functioning in this sort of defensive three back with Sarah Gordon, once again, anchoring a lot of things. And there is a lot of a speed when it comes to sort of looking at that attacking core of Portland, especially with somebody like a Morgan Weaver, who just can absolutely go toe to toe with Sarah Gordon. And also, like, let's talk a little bit about the height difference there between those two. But just the little things that sort of stick out during a semifinal. But even in making that adjustment in the second half, didn't pan out. In fact, after Simone Charlie comes into the game again, we saw a similar scenario with Spirit and OL Reign. They make this adjustment on the personnel side of things, and the Red Stars get a go ahead goal, just sort of around this substitution. Sarah Woldmoe, again, these midfielders that we're chatting a lot about, getting the ball, taking the space in front of her, which she was, let's be frank, she was given a ton of space here.
Yeah.
And just having the presence of mind to say, you know what, I'm just going to try some stuff, and just takes a shot, a rocket from distance, and it just ends up in the back of the net. And Chicago find themselves in maybe a little unfamiliar place, in which not only do they have a lead to defend, which they have been very used to in their last several games, but they've got a 2-goal lead to defend, which is maybe kind of nice if you're the Red Stars defense.
Sandra, that goal and really the shot from Sarah Woldmoe, midfielder for Chicago, is very similar to the mindset and the type of play that we saw from Ashley Sanchez in the Washington versus OL Reign game. It was the presence of mind to understand awareness on the field, understand awareness of opponents and defenders, and the space that you can attack, and then also the confidence to say, I'm going to take this shot, I'm going to put the team on my shoulders and find the back of the net. It's not really a typical type of move we see from Woldmoe, shooting from distance. Heck, I want to see more of it because she finds the back of the net. And I think another interesting part of this, you mentioned the substitutes coming in for Portland, trying to change things up, trying to get momentum. It was difficult. There were moments of this game where there was pretty soccer and possession, but a lot of it, the majority of it, wasn't that pretty of soccer. There wasn't a lot of rhythm. There wasn't a lot of momentum for either side because it was a bit broken. When Chicago did win it, and they weren't looking to just keep it, they were looking to send it. It was a lot of out of bounds, a lot of throw-ins happening, lots of corner kicks for Portland. They had 7 throughout this match. And it's really difficult for teams to gain momentum of a play, of a game, of a half, and then dig themselves out of a 1-goal deficit, 2-goal deficit. It's difficult to do. And then even having that rotation of players coming on, it's like 1 in 100 chance that that's going to change things. And Mark Parsons had to try it. He had to bring on players, see what they could spark and see what they can change. But in almost an ugly soccer matchup towards the end of this one, it's not going to change too much because Chicago has their game plan. They're sitting back. They have the 2-goal lead, so they don't need to expose themselves defensively. And that's where Portland would have broken through. But a lot of missed opportunities from Portland in this one too, that similar to what happened with OL Reign and Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. The Red Stars end up closing out this game in the 2-1 win, bringing on extra substitution for Alyssa Mott's coming on for Rachel Hill and sort of help cover extra ground, right? Rachel Hill sort of going down with a little bit of a hard knock of her own, and you just sort of wondered if this was going to be another moment for the Red Stars, right? If they're losing another piece of the puzzle. Cassie Miller too. We forgot to mention that at one point the goalkeeper for the Red Stars taking
Yes.
some time getting looked at. At one point, the backup goalkeeper Emily Boyd was getting warmed up. It was looking it was feeling a certain type of way, as if it was getting more and more risky for the Red Stars. But they end up coming out and defeating Portland Thorns 2-0. The Red Stars now 2-2 when facing Portland Thorns in a semifinal, in an NWSL semifinal, and finally getting a long coveted win at Providence Park, their first win since 2013. Big, and you heard the player, you could see it on the players after the game what it meant to them. I'm dipping my head into post game chatting, hearing Danny Colaprico, Katie Johnson, Cassie Miller, all chatting a little bit about the game and what that means. And for somebody like Danny Colaprico, who's been with the club since her rookie season in 2015, and kind of making a joke about like it's my first time winning at Providence Park too, because like that's how long it's been, right? So it was a big day on Chicago side, and on Portland side, a bit of an end of an era. I think we need to, before we close out, chat a little bit about that. Ultimately, this is head coach Mark Parsons' final game with Portland Thorns. Earlier this year, said that he would be departing after the season with Thorns to go on and coach the Netherlands women's team. And you just sort of saw the scenes there. Gutted for that. Bella Bixby went on social media to tweet out and say that she had to deal with the loss of her father. And we just want to send our condolences there. It's a very difficult thing to deal with, A, and then B, it's even can't imagine playing through something like that. But tough day on the other side, right? So it's always the joy of victory, right? And the agony of defeat when it comes to these sort of knockout scenarios. So congrats to the Red Stars. And then on the Portland Thorns side of things, again, just feels like a little bit of an end of an era, and maybe the start of a new one, because they have been making some announcements of their own in terms of hiring GM Karina LeBlanc, and recent reports out of The Athletic that the head coach has already been selected in Ryan Wilkinson for the Thorns moving forward. So we will see what happens with both the Thorns and OL Reign in the offseason moving forward. But for now, there is one more match left, the biggest one of the year, quite frankly. The NWSL Championship has its two finalists. It will be the third place Washington Spirit versus the fourth place Chicago Red Stars on November 20th at Lynn Family Stadium in Louisville, Kentucky, with a 12 noon Eastern kickoff. It'll air on CBS, internationally on Twitch. You can get your tickets at nwslsoccer.com/championship.